Scott Fuller, welcome to the Society of the Sacred Pixel. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Um, Afternoon, everybody. Wherever you are, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Know a couple of you. Looking forward to meeting a few more of y'all. But yeah, excited to just kind of run through a little bit of what we do here, and then at the same time, talk a little bit about how we're kind of keeping humanity in the design process and just kind of in the conversation as it were. So this is probably going to be one of the fastest talks I've ever given, because anybody who knows me for any point in time knows that I tend to give long answers. So I am going to do my absolute best to get through what I have for y'all. I run the Studio Temporary. We're an iconic design and brand identity studio, and known to deliver a spectacular range of packaging, illustration, brand identity type design campaigns, all that type of stuff. We do this on a daily basis. We build iconic brands like these. It's so funny because if you look through a lot of these different things, some of these were done 12 years ago, and some of these were done last year. But it's very hard to tell the difference between the two unless you've been following me for a long, long time. Just the idea behind what we do is we build things that last. So whether it's an identity, whether it's an illustration, a campaign, etc., I tend to never ever try to make anything that falls with any current trends, fads, etc. And it's been that way ever since I've started my career, which is now just about 17 years on, almost 18 years, and it's been a lot of fun. Little about me. Studio Temper was born officially in 2012 in the back of an old sign shop in downtown Noonan. Couple minute walk from where my wife and I lived at the time. This is before I had hair on. I had hair on my head, more hair on my head than I did on my face. It has now switched in epic proportions. My first little poster, one of my first big talks, small town creatives talking about just kind of getting things started, and a nice callback to the signpost that was in front of the old studio. But things go a little crazy at times. So whether it's work, whether it's jobs, etc. But just as things are broken and you can't build something out of the pieces. I was in Brooklyn in March of last year. I had an insane opportunity to do a day-long workshop with the one and only Lance Wyman, who's if any of y'all know who that is, great. If not, look up the 1968 Mexico Olympics, and that should tell you everything you need to know about how spectacular this guy is. He is one of the biggest influences on my career. And to not only meet him in person and study under him, even just for a day, was unbelievable. One of the things he had us do at the end was, we talked about symbolism in design. He talked about, take a letter, figure it out, and design it out, and put some meaning behind it. And this idea that, things get broken, things go sideways, you can pick up the pieces there and build something even better. So that was kind of a little ode to my career at that point. In 2015, started the studio full time, moved into Switchyard's Downtown Club here in Atlanta. I actually designed the sign that's on front of a 100-year-old building. My buddy hand painted that. My original studio, always a good times there. Long time. This feels like forever ago, but this was it. Designing a ton of stuff for my adopted hometown, everything from postcards and hats and patches to coffee shop signage, including the custom type on the left hand side. I play table tennis. I used to on a national level. Now I still compete, and since we of course had a table tennis table there in the at Switchyards, I had to design a club for it. And then of course it wasn't enough. We had to do Atlanta's only subterranean ping pong stadium, lovingly painted by a fantastic sign painter there in Atlanta. And it's really funny because that is actually the basement that you see in that door down there in the bottom left, and the street is literally above the top of that, so anybody could look down and just watch us play. It was spectacular. Pennants and neon signs and flags, and you know, but then things change for a reason, as always. We all remember where we were when everything happened. And I think this is one of the big, my first big point for today is change your process, change your outlook. This is something that has, this is something that at times has been difficult for me. I'm very much a creature of habit, and that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing at times as well. As I have learned over the course of my career, we've all heard, things are going wrong, things are going crazy. Everybody is dealing with the same thing, and we just assume that, okay, that's just how it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that's something that took me a while to fix that. It's like, just because it's always been done this way or everybody's going through the same thing, in my work, I would never approach it the same way as everybody else. So why should I do that in my, in my personal life? And it's something that, like I said, it's one of the school of hard knocks things. My wife is a big proponent of this, helped me out a lot to help make that happen. And in the end, you never settle. And I have, I'm trying to kind of build build that career on. But in the end, yes, there's nothing that's ever going to be perfect. So don't let perfection stand in the way of excellence. I'm still constantly searching for it, constantly, on the lookout for that, and however I can, do better and do more, but do it in the right way. But this is something I want to talk about really quick. But this idea of iconic by design. So, this is me. It's just I'm literally like I'm wearing the same hoodie and the hat and everything, but this is me. I ever since I got started in design, my whole deal, my first mentor was Steph Geispieler, the guy who designed the NBC logo. I met him at a HOW conference right before my senior year of college. I studied his work. I studied Shemaev and Geismar. I studied, Michael Beirut, Vignelli, Rand, and then a ton of other designers who've been dead for a very, very long time. Most of the people that I learned from are dead. But understanding that with the tools that the very limited tools that they had, and I think about what we have now. If you look at the computers, you look at the books, you look at all these different things, there's so many designs out there. We have still to this day have no idea, who did them, who designed this, who designed that. There's so many things we may never know, because to them it was just a job. I'd get up in the morning and I do that, and then I go home. But what they were able to build out of with the limited tools they had and they're still last to this day, is amazing. When I graduated college, I jumped out into the field, and the big keyword at that time was sustainability. Raise your hand if y'all remember that one. I know some of y'all have been in the industry for a minute, so y'all raise your hand if you remember that one. For 3 years, man, everything was craft and cardboard and compressed wood and green and leafy and organic, and it was just but for and I kind of knew coming out that it wasn't going to last, but at the same time, I'm still trying to design something that are not based on any trends or fads. And I kind of got made fun of a little bit for that. But as you continue to go, if you look back at some of my old logos, only, I believe, 3 of them over the course of my career have been changed, and I redesigned 2 of them. So and then we'll talk a little bit about how to get to that point, and here's a few things we kind of live by. So this is, you want to know the studio's process, this is it. And I talked a little bit about, designing in like an AI obsessed world. And I will preface this by saying this. For me, AI is neither good nor bad. I think there are some things that it's fantastic for. I think there are some things that it should not be used for. Um, when it comes specifically to design, I'm also an adjunct professor at the Miami Ad School here at the Atlanta campus, and I've dealt with this in my class before. But with AI, I feel like in the design industry, I feel there are some things it can definitely help with, but I feel like we're heading straight into AI about 10 or 12 steps too early. Using it for, just to kind of think for us a little bit, I think, especially when you're trying to figure out, when when you're doing concepts and stuff at the beginning, I feel like that's probably one of the worst ways to do it, because as designers, people come to us for who we are. Yes, they know we do good work, and yes, they do that. But I have found over the years, people don't hire your work, they hire the person. And that's a huge, huge key. If you take nothing away from this, remember that. I've told my students, for years, it's like your work gets you in the door, but who you are keeps you there. And that's the truth. I can have great work, but if I don't have a good work ethic, it's not going to last very long, no matter what you do. There was an agency in Austin, one of the just somebody that I've known and followed for basically my entire career, says I'll hire the second best portfolio. He said, because I can teach somebody to be a great designer, but I can't teach someone to be a good person. So there is something to that there, if you're teachable, etc. But it takes time and it takes effort on your part to get to that place. And I feel like at times, it's that part, the very important part is skipped, because there's so much available right now. It's like, why wouldn't I do this? And I think that that's something we want to take into consideration. But this idea of, uniquely personal, I'll tell you, I'll show you the project here in a minute, but, I sit down with my clients, give me 5 minutes with somebody. I can get done more in 5 minutes than any one of y'all in 20 emails. And here's why. When you sit down with your client, you sit down with folks that want to work with you. One of the things that they want to know is they want to know they're being seen. They want to know they're being heard. They want to know they're being understood. And it's kind of hard to do that when they're filling out a form. Yes, there are some things that make it a little bit more unique, but I will take a couple extra minutes to make sure that we really align in what we're trying to do. So this idea of uniquely personal, I want to know the person behind the brand, because in the end, that's what people are coming after. Number two, simple, not simplistic. I think it was Einstein that said things should be as simple as possible, but never simpler. And I think that's very true. And then this idea of timeless, I think I've talked about that probably a good bit just in the last couple minutes. But above all, just learn to have these good conversations. I feel like it kind of got lost a little bit, whether it was over COVID or even kind of leading up to that, happy to kind of be remote, happy to, just send emails and text messages and whatnot. But that communication is very, very key. And it's something that you'll remember. You'll remember that meal with somebody. You'll remember a conversation with you have somebody, but I remember a DM thread. You're going to remember those things a lot longer. So position yourself in that way. And just to kind of prove this whole thing works, now, some reason my music is not working too well right now, so I'm just going to go through and just kind of chit chat. I'm just going to run through some of this, but this is work that I've done over the course of my career, some for big brands, some for little brands, some for ones around the corner, some for national and international brands. Some are friends just come in and say, hey, do you think this would be cool? And I just say, yeah, let's give it a shot. And off we go, and it's a lot of fun looking back on this, because each one of these are, different times in my life, different times, and, what I was dealing with, or, different levels of design that I was working with in my career. But it is so much fun looking back because I can look at each one of these and say, I know that I didn't do any of this based on any trend, based on any fad. And I know that I gave them something that they could pass on. And I've always been really, really happy about that. There's story after story after story in each one of these. And I know that I don't have time to jump into every single one of them. But I remember where I was when I did each one of these. And it was wild to just to think through all that. But there's always a story behind each and every one of them. Come to the Atlanta Hawks, man. I did this design as kind of a just for fun, on a project for ESPN. Ended up not being used. I posted it, tagged the Hawks. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call into their office, and hey, there's this thing called the NBA 2K League, an esports league, and Nike's agency has designed everything around the league and every team except for this one. And we want you to do it because we want somebody local, somebody who understands the culture, somebody who understands these things. And this was it. Jumped in there, designed courts, designed uniforms, designed, all these different things, designed merchandise. One of my favorite hats that I own. Here's the team in the game. Here's the team in real life. Look exactly the same. And, from this comes, by the way, are there any, by raise of hands, are there any, music fans in here? This is, if anybody knows this guy, this is Killer Mike, one half of Run the Jewels and a local legend here in Atlanta. We met through the Hawks and we got to know each other. This is our first business meeting at the varsity, and had a good time there. From there, got a chance to work on his barbershop where I have been going for quite a few years. Now all the capes that they drape over you have this on there, which is really cool. New packaging, which is just at the shelves. From there, I get to work on a 50-year-old brand called Bankhead Seafood. And by the way, I had a week and a half to work on this thing. You had Miss Harden, who ran this place for 50 years, decided to shut it all down. And I can tell you, having met her before she passed away, she probably could have run it for another 20 years. Just by the way she gripped my elbow. If you're from the South, you understand what I'm talking about. But my goodness, just a local legend there in the neighborhood, fried fish and hush puppies, lines around the block every single time they were open. But they had nothing. They had just an old hand-painted sign. And I basically had a week and a half, not just to design this, by the way, but to design this and this and this and this and this. And then a little nod to T.I. and Killer Mike, who took this over. But this is, by the way, this is a food, not a food truck. This is a food tank. It is well over 30 feet long. It is huge. I am 6'1". I come up to the S in special on this truck. It is massive. So here's a quick funny story, and here's where the kind of humanity comes in. You think, oh man, we'll just throw a wrap on it and do whatever. It's like, no. This brand has been around for a long, long time. This brand is not new. This brand is not flashy or shiny or anything like that. So this is not what we need to do. When they gave me the truck, that truck was pure white with silver wheels, chrome bumpers, chrome everything all over the truck. I told them, I said, under no circumstances should you wrap this thing. I said, you need to paint it matte black. Paint it matte black, and then we'll put some special decals on. So I sent it down to Thomasville. It was about a 2.5-hour drive from Atlanta to get it painted. My buddy called me, hey, it's done. Tell him to come get it. So they went down there to drive it and to pick it up. And he said, by the way, he called me back a couple minutes later and said, by the way, there's a problem. This whole truck looks like crap. I said, I just sent them down. Like, what in the world are you talking about, man? And he said, no, you don't understand. The painted part looks amazing, but everything else is horrible. The wheels are still chrome, the bumpers are still chrome. It doesn't fit. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I said, I want you to murder the entire truck. I said, paint the wheels black, paint the rims black, paint the bumper black. If it's chrome, you paint it back, paint it black. I said, if the tires aren't black enough, you paint those black. And he said, and you'll tell them. I said, oh yeah, not a problem. They still don't know to this day. But it came back amazing. Cans and all kind of stuff. And then at the launch, which was great. And, but keeping the human element behind all of this. With Iceman, kind of the same thing. Take something that's been around for a little while, fix it up, add a little character to it. You see these now all over the Southeast. Give them a little workers union thing. And fun little details too, like the angle of this is at 32 degrees, which is when ice freezes. So little things like that can add a little character to things. Tell AI to do that. So these are the type of things we want to kind of look out for. So sorry, I had to pop down here and make sure somebody wasn't sending me a message here. And the little icons. If you've noticed by now, I'm using the same angles of the logo in every single one of these little icons and illustrations for this. So little fun ways to kind of bring everything together. Little fun thing to remember. There we go. Little nameplates. And, there's Derek. I had to make Derek, owner. They opened a spot in Nashville, so of course I made them an announcement for that. Once again, you see the Iceman logo shape everywhere. And then if you've ever been to Nashville, been to Hatch Print, you will also recognize this as well, and they love this shirt. And then just kind of moving on, you get festivals and pulling in things from around the photography from the area, mixing things together. They're a train town, but there's also different fun places there in town. Like there was this amazing 2-story Irish restaurant. And if you look, half the train is the train, the other half the train is the restaurant. Little things like that are just way too much fun. And then fun little details like down here in the bottom right, where it says the train's like serial number is actually the dates of the festival. So, going from there. And then just throughout the years, doing for these, I'm actually working on this year's poster right now. Love using bits and pieces of the guitar to kind of go from there. And then making stuff for the jazz series that they do, a secondary version. And then one of the last ones I want to go through, and then I'll be done here in just a couple of seconds. But Art in the Paint, they go all over the world. They paint basketball courts. They do community programs, etc. But they do so many different things. They said, how can we find a symbol? How can we find something that's unique to us? So my first thought is, what is the one thing that everybody has there? This paintbrush, and it doesn't have to be for one particular thing. So anybody can hold up a paintbrush, and they're basically making the shape of a logo, for Art in the Paint. So every paintbrush that you're using becomes the logo. It kind of becomes that symbol. So we go through there and make that. We build little things for them. Heritage courts. We're kicking this off in a big way in 2026, and little fun design things. You take a basketball and you remove one line, you get an H and a C. These are the type of moves. These are the type of things that you study for. These are the type of things that you research. These are the type of things that you sketch and try and fail and to do these different things over the course of your career to get to this point, right? And this is not a prompt. This is something that you can tell there's some heart and soul into this, and then having fun little things instead of inspiring hoops, inspiring hope in some of the inner cities that they do a lot of work in. Yeah, fun little thing. If you know anything about Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, Too Strong. We made these for baseball and whatnot. Little team, special girls team, basketball team logo. You can see a little basketball there in the Ant's face. Fun story, I actually started this project in my sketchbook when I took off from Atlanta on a flight to Austin. And by the time I landed, I had this. So always, always, always fun. By the way, if you want to get a lot of good work done on the plane, you get the left side on the window. You can prop your elbow on the window. You can move your laptop just a little to the left, and then you have the rest of the tray to use for your mouse. So just a little thing, and we're now their official design partner. Process-wise, a lot of what we talk about. Talk first, sketch second, always. You know, I'm horrible at sketching. I can't believe I'm even showing y'all this. But these are this is where I get to. You'll see the stuff that didn't work. You'll see, I don't even let my students use like Procreate because it can make it look finished before it's done. I have them do it in paper with pen because I want to see the mess ups, because you never know where that inspiration is going to come from, And next thing you know, jamming away with stuff like this for McNeil Signs, my buddy sign painter, probably one of my most well known logos that I've ever done with two of the crappiest sketches I've ever seen on a breakfast at Silver Skillet. But yeah, and then very quick couple updates, and then we'll be done. Like I said, I'm going quick. Why is this thing stopping? Okay. 10th anniversary. Very happy about that. New branding for Pilot Mall. Wonderful stamp design. I started doing these stamps as just as a fun little project, and this stamp actually landed me a spot on the short list to design a stamp for the post office in the next couple of years. So stay tuned for there. Making different things like that. I'm just double checking. Thanks so much. Let's see. We've got this. Of course, I talked about the new packaging for the swag shop. I started a streetwear brand. Y'all saw the hat. I wanted something that talked a lot about what I do without necessarily saying the studio temporary. Got bandanas from one of my favorite bakeries and bread shops up in there. Little something for T.I. and his Trap City Cafe. I made cloth diapers, you guys. 4 cloth diapers. I have a 14-year-old, and I have now a little baby girl. She'll be 2. I made these for her, and I had a great time with that. Mellow Mushroom, designing shirts for them for a while now. If you've seen their 50th anniversary coming out, all I had to do was the 50. And I had about 2 weeks to do that, and I finished it in a couple days. Because once again, you're finding the human element in this as well. So now you go run a Mellow Mushroom, you see these everywhere. Little electronic racing, e-race electric go-karts here in Atlanta. Pearl Dynamics. So I'll tell you this one. This is one of the ones that I was talking about earlier. So I have a wonderful lady here in town, builds things out of shipping containers. Unbelievable work. And now she's working with biomaterials and whatnot. So she wanted to call it Pearl Dynamics. So Pearl was her grandmother's name, and that's who she wanted to use. It was kind of a mix of that. So we were going through and we're like, we're not doing oysters, we're not doing pearls, we're not doing, clams and all these different things. I said, we want something that was just really, really beautiful. And we're going through. And I said, well, obviously you name this after your grandmother. So on a random note of just what should I do? I said, what was her favorite animal? He said her favorite animal was an elephant. I said, that's the logo. A little bit of a P in there. Got the pearl in there, and has absolute, and things come from strange places. So there we go. Flying models, little stuff like that. Things for Share Our Strengths, which is actually the company that runs No Kid Hungry. So designing the identity for them, absolute blast. Custom type and stuff for beats per minute. Little fun with that one. One of my absolute favorites, designing that. And of course, something for Hank Aaron. And we're coming back here. Now, very quickly, and I'm done, I promise. A couple things to remember very, very quickly. In general, there's not a lot of this going around on either side these days, so let's have some of that. Um, this is very, very true. Um, you know, just just kind of consider this one. Always do this. Um, a little something to think about as well. Definitely do this. Um, I think sometimes people get into this and, especially nowadays, I'm going for likes, I'm going to go viral or whatnot. Why are you not, I want to get better. I want to get better at what I'm doing, And one of my buddies put up on Twitter the other day, it's like, when did we stop doing this so that we could get better? You know? And in the end, this is always true. Um, this is always true no matter what industry you're working in. But always remember this. And, make time for what matters. My family, my son here at Disney. Um, there's a video up of him meeting Mickey for the first time. And then it was my first time at Disney too. And then he calls me over and I go over there and, he introduces me and he's like, Mickey, this is my dad. He's an artist just like you. And of course I cry like a little baby. And then a couple years ago, we didn't think we could have any more kids. And now we have her. We've got Mia. She'll turn 2 on Thursday. And I remember my wife went in and my son and I went down to the cafeteria and I started working on this little icon. And right when I posted it, I got the call from the nurses saying that she was out and I had a healthy little girl, and this is probably one of the coolest things I've ever made. And I'll keep pushing to best this as much as I can, but you can't really beat this. That being said, if you want to know what I'm up to as we go, I'm at thestudiotemporary.com, a new website coming beginning of next month, and at Studio Temporary on Instagram. And thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. Man, that's a barrage of
I know
amazing.
It's a lot.
No,
it's
but
a lot.
It's your work is so strong, and I see so much craft in there. I was so glad that you showed your sketches.
I love it. It's like I see how horrible you are at sketching, and it gives me hope.
That's exactly what I was trying not to say, but you said it. All right. Well, thanks so much. So if
my wife laughed at that one.
All right, so we have one question already. So if anyone has questions, like I said,
yes.
Put them in the chat.
Come on.
Or raise your hand. And when I like your question, it means I saw it. Joshua, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I loved the food truck project, and I was very curious, what was it about painting versus a wrap that made you so confident that painting was going to be the better choice?
So 2 reasons. One is with a wrap, I mean, yes, there's math, there's different things like that. But at the same time, this company's been around for 50 years. We don't want something that looks brand new. The wraps tend to do that. The second thing you have to think about is if you decide to change something, or if the wrap for some reason starts to peel, what's underneath it is pure white truck. So that would just kind of throw everything off. So when you're thinking about what you're building, when it comes, with the design, you have to think from the very beginning, before you even start sketching. You have to understand where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used, and how it could get screwed up. You have to think about that from the very beginning before you even consider what it looks like, right? So as you jump into these things, that's that's kind of one of the main things you want to think about. So for me, the painting was that was like the easiest. Just
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can absolutely see how paint ages very differently than a wrap, right? And you get that you get an actual sense of age if they leave it painted for a while. The brand looks like it's not brand new or has a big hole in it. You're right. So that makes a lot of sense.
I wanted them to look like an OG because they are, So you do everything you can to make that happen.
All right. Thank you, Joshua. Ralph, why don't you ask your question?
So I like a lot of your work. I like doing a lot of identity work as well when I have, time or a project's coming in. But just want to know, do you actually you have a lot of work and there's a lot of time put into it. So do you actually have the time to, to put off all these fire drills and tickets, or do you, when it gets busy, do you seek additional help from designers in your area?
I do like to work on a lot of things at once. I like being able to jump back and forth. My entire career up until I went out on my own was in-house design. I have only worked in an actual design agency for 3 months of my entire career. And so I learned how to work on a lot of things at once. But for me, I craved variety. That was the big thing for me. It's like, I want a variety of projects. I want a variety of clients. I want to work in every single area that I can think of. Now, there are a few that I won't touch. I won't touch, there are certain industries I don't get into. I don't do anything related to alcohol. I've just turned 40. I've never had a drink, smoke, or anything like that before in my life. I've seen some of the different things. I've been approached by breweries. I'm in Atlanta, man. I mean, you can't throw a rock without hitting 2 breweries, and they're great projects. They have phenomenal budgets. You have great creative control over everything. I'll design restaurants and everything. I understand they have a drink menu or something like that. Like, that's one thing. Yeah, I know, Jan, I know, but they haven't come to me in a long time. But yeah, I mean, but you're not a jerk, like, I don't just say, how dare you? I just explain. I say, I appreciate it. It's just not something I'm willing to do. Every single owner that I've talked to has been super nice about the whole thing. One guy actually said, what would have happened? It's like, what if I tripled the budget? I actually had somebody tell me that. And I said, now I feel really bad. I said, and honored at the same time. I said, but it's not a question of money. And he said, okay, now I believe you. And I said, just out of curiosity, would you triple the budget? And he says, yeah, I would. So it was kind of fun. But in the end, I like the variety and I like the challenge of working on multiple things at once. I try not to get to the point where I have to send stuff off to do that. I think I've had somebody help me out a couple of times on just getting some concepts down. But that's very rare for me to send work like that out. I like touching, I'm a very detail-oriented person. At times that can bite me because it means I have to make sure that everything's done in a certain way, myself, and at times that can bite me, and it's something that I'm working through. But the end, the end product kind of speaks for itself.
All right. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Scott. Andrew says, not so much a question, but I love how much humanity shows through in your work and ethos. I completely agree. Jen has a question.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, I guess maybe Jeremy more so. I'm just curious about your font experience. I feel like you mentioned it in the beginning of your presentation that you made a font, or could you talk a little bit about that?
About a dozen of them at this point. I did my first one with Retro Supply, Dustin Lee, back in 2015. Solid 70. If you've seen Solid 70, that was me. If you've seen, oh my gosh, all these different things, Authority, that was me. I did a lot of typefaces through Dustin and whatnot, through Retro Supply, and then I did some of my own. Obsessed Compressed was a good one. I did, I've just done a bunch over the years, just for fun. I love building custom type. I love customizing everything that I possibly can that comes out of my studio. And it's wild to look back and see all that. And some I'll turn into typefaces. Some I probably got 20 other ones that are probably have the typeface about half done, just because I build out so much the characters, and there's always those one or two you kind of keep close to the vest, like this one with Iconic. It has an entire typeface that's done. I have an outlined version of it, and then I have this version. I've got the numbers, I've got all the quotation marks, I've got all the symbols, I've got everything for all of this, and you can't have it unless you pay unless you pay me a lot of money. But I can guarantee y'all don't have that amount. But it's something that I've enjoyed. It's one of my big proprietary typefaces that I use for Iconic, and I'm excited.
What if we triple the budget? No.
Y'all don't know where the budget started yet, though, so be careful there.
That's true.
If y'all love the typeface so much, you can actually go and get something on it with the typeface on it yourself. If you go to stayiconicbrand.com, I've got hoodies. It's cold out right now, right? So they're perfect for that. Nice, thick hoodies. I've got long sleeve shirts with printing up the sleeves. Very, very nice. And I've got the design studio temporary, or the Iconic Industries design department tee as well. You'll love that one. Tote bags for those of y'all who enjoy that. Decals, hats. I might only have one left, and then that camp flag over my left shoulder. I think I might have a couple of those left. So, get on it.
Cool. Yeah. Link is in the comments
Yes.
to the two fonts you mentioned, and to the Stay Iconic Brand Big Cartel site.
Yes.
All right.
Who else? Let's keep it going.
Yeah. Shin says he's just clarifying that he was just saying that a sketch doesn't have to be perfect. So I think, yeah,
No.
he's got.
The sketches are for you. The sketches are for you. They're for you to figure that out. I do have some clients that understand the process and love seeing sketches and whatnot, but generally the sketches I keep to myself, because I do them in my way, and to try to get to a certain thing. What was it? Cruz Novillo, one of my favorite designers of all time. He's like, like he said, it's like, first I think, then I sketch. I want to have a reason why I'm doing this. There's a reason behind every pencil stroke or pen stroke or whatever. There needs to be that. That's why that conversation with people at the beginning, before you ever put pencil to paper, you can figure out a direction without a logo. You can figure out a direction without looking at imagery. You can figure out a direction just by having a conversation. And that might be a whole nother bit. Maybe I'll do another logo design workshop here in the next month or so. I'll let y'all know if I do. But it'll, we talk a lot about that. But you'd be amazed what you can find out from that versus a Pinterest mood board, which, by the way, I've never liked Pinterest from the beginning. I'll just come straight out and say it. For me, it was almost like pre-AI. It was like a curated thing. You click on one thing, it's going to show you something very similar to that, or take you down this or this collections or whatever, and you just kind of follow the typical path. I've got things that y'all see behind me, all the stuff that I have, on my, behind me and on my desk. I've got stuff from, original stuff from like CSA and whatnot, all this stuff that, that I'm constantly looking, I look through. I can pull over here and, pull out old buttons from original buttons from Epcot's, when they opened, to, I love like old keychains, right? Or even, there's another, little stuff like this that's all just kind of within reach, little fun matchbooks and decals and whatnot that I just, even just something like that, I love that. And little pieces of packaging and whatnot. You look at how they were built, you look at the little things they do. They used a lot less. They had infinitely less than what y'all did. I had infinitely less than what most of y'all have, when y'all first started in design. And I graduated in 2008. I didn't have Skillshare and YouTube and, influencers and all that type of stuff. I had to, I bought shelves upon shelves upon shelves of these books, man, and most of them are older than me. So that's where I learned, not about, copying how this looked or how that looked. I want to get into their minds, why did they make this move? Why is this successful? Why did this fit the brand? What is the story behind it, etc. And that's kind of what we do here.
All right. We got a few more questions. I have one actually. So because you teach, Scott, what kind of pitfalls do you see students making or falling into? And be as specific as you can. Like, are there things you see in their work or their portfolio or the way the portfolio is put together that are happening a lot? Common trends that you find to be issues in them getting hired.
3 things. Number 1, if I look through a student's portfolio and the only thing I see is work from school, I tend to just not even go, because that says 2 things for me. 1, I like to see people that, with design, it's like, I'm not looking for a production designer, somebody who, here's an assignment and here's how you do that assignment. Oh, and then I'm going to go do it. I want to see somebody who's a self-starter. I want to see somebody who can, work beyond, the brief. I want to see somebody who's, inspired to, in their own lives, etc. I'm not saying you have to do a million different things, but man, when I showed my first portfolio, man, I only showed a little bit of work from college, maybe like 20% of the work. And the rest is all stuff that I did on my own, because this is a big thing for me. I think that is, I think it's very important. The second thing, students who cannot back up, who cannot tell me anything about their work. I've seen this so much. They'll come in, they'll have photos, they'll have, they'll have, all these different things. And I'll say, okay, I want you to talk me through this logo. Explain to me what this means. I'll ask them, why'd you use this? Why this typeface? Why, when you put a river in there instead of like an ocean or a beach or something like that, why? And there's no explanation. They just can't do it, which starts to make me wonder. It's like, did you even design this? I remember in college, one of my professors told me, it's like, you just spent 3 weeks designing this logo or 2 weeks designing this logo. You should be able to talk about it for the next 20 minutes off the top of your head, because you've literally spent the last 2 weeks of your life working on this. How would you not be able to, to do that? And then, and the other thing that I've seen, and then just the ability, once again, to just communicate, I've seen people that didn't have the greatest book, but their understanding of design and their understanding of, having a good conversation and being able to relate to people. I can work with that. I've had people come in. It's like, I'm okay. Look, I'm okay with people who are confident. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But if you're so confident in the way that you're doing things that you can't learn or you can't grow or you can't, something about kids nowadays, and I can say kids, I can say kids because I just turned 40. But something about kids nowadays take criticism as basically the biggest personal insult that you can find. And that's a problem. You take criticism, you learn from it, and you go and you move on and you become better. If you can't do that, you're going to plateau, and it's going to happen really quick.
All right. Great thoughts. Thank you. So Ralph has a couple more questions. Ralph, why don't you jump back in?
Yeah, I just have a few. Just want to see what project you worked on that didn't go as planned, and who's your dream client?
Projects that didn't go as planned. I don't have very many of those, just because we really get everything out on the table before I ever put pencil to paper. So we're on the same page from the very beginning. So it's a kind of a rarity for me. There are always projects that it's like, man, I wish they maybe if they tried this or tried that. I think the only time that I really have an issue with like, man, this project really didn't go the way I thought is they might take what I did and then they'll modify it outside of this and they'll put it up the wrong way or hand it over to a social media designer and they'll just, jack it all up. And I'm like, that's where I'm, it's kind of it. But I remember talking to Steph, Guy Spieler. This was, 15 years ago. And I asked him about that one time. I was like, you've done work for huge, TV stations. You've done work for cities. You've done work for, all these different things. Like, how do you feel about that? And he said, you do as much as you can to give them everything that you can possibly do. You do everything you can possibly do to make it as idiot proof as possible. But just know somebody's going to screw it up and there's nothing you can do about it. So you don't dwell on it and you move on. I learned that from very early on in my career. So it is what it is. We'll always have those little things where it's like, but in the end, it just is what it is. I've had a few projects where I've had to, kill the project just because they keep changing things up or they decide, oh, we want to go in this direction or that direction. We've kind of started. And after a certain point, it goes, okay, this is an entirely new project. So we're going to have to start over. And they say, well, I don't want to start over. It's like, well, I can't keep doing this because of this, and this. So, it's a kill fee and different things like that in my contract. So I've only had to do that, I think, 3 times in, the last 12 years. So the importance of doing your homework and having those conversations before you get into it in a big way, very, very important. And as far as my dream client, I don't know. I mean, there's always things like I could spot on. It's like, I want to work with Lego. I want to work with World's Strongest Man. I want to work with, I want to work with Under Armour. I desperately want to work with Under Armour. Harley Davidson. I would love to. Anything Supercross, man. My dad was a pro Supercross racer. I've always wanted to do that. Man, give me some monster trucks. Give me some stuff like that. But man, one of my favorite projects in the last couple of years was designing diapers. I couldn't have called that. But I had so much fun doing that because I was doing it for my daughter. All those illustrations were like, those were for my little girl. But I never would have come up and just said, I want to design diapers and then everybody laughed. You never know. So it's somebody I was like, what's your favorite project? And I'm like, it's the next one. That's my favorite project. I want variety and, I've been given it so far. So I want to keep that going.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ralph. And then Jen's got a couple questions about books and music.
All right, let's hear it.
Oh, the music one was actually from me, but I wanted to know what bands or musicians or groups you're currently listening to or digging right now.
I mean, not necessarily like, oh, I like this or I like that. I'm one of those guys who will just put like the randomizer on iTunes and just whatever comes up, and it could be a million different things. It could be, here comes Johnny Cash, here comes, something from, Good Night. Yeah, what is it? Stuff from like the early 90s or, 2000s or whatnot. It could be no Nickelback though. I mean, look, I understand why everybody hates them, but they do have a few good things. But at the same time, I'm like, give me Green Day.
Right.
Nickelback is like a Green Day wannabe. So it is what it is. But that was a big 2000s thing. But before most of y'all's time. But yeah, it's just kind of whatever. I could be listening to a million different things. So I really don't have I've never been to a concert. I'm 40 years old and never been to a concert. Never really been like, hey, I need to go do this. I need to go see that. It is kind of fun to to get Killer Mike's releases before everybody else.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun. And then as far as the books, I mean, I've got some first editions here that are a lot of fun. My first design book ever was ironically the Shemaiah and Geismar book. I've had this book for 18 years. I've had this book, and this was where I first learned design from these guys. But then I've got stuff in here from oh my gosh, I've got the you know, the Yasper, the Koyama, the books. I've got these. I've had these for a while. I love those. You know, then random stuff like this is Signets, you know, German and whatnot. And like, but then you look on the inside and it's just like page after page after page of this, you know, and it's pretty wild. And then, you know, my two of my favorite books though, and this book you can get online for like $5, but it's the U.S. marks on pottery, porcelain, and clay. It is this thick. It is huge, but on the inside is literally every like every single like design that's on the bottom of any type of pottery or whatnot, going back to like biblical times. Like this is it is just page after page after page of this, and it's one of my absolute favorites for type for getting things set up and whatnot. And then this one, my students hate it when I bring this one out. The 1979 Trademark Design Register from the U.S. Patent Office. It is every logo and trademark that was registered in the U.S. for 1979. So this is not a curated anything like the design books nowadays. It's the good, the bad, the ugly, the scary, and but it is just, it's an entire encyclopedia, of this thing. It's huge, right? So what I do in my class to do with my kids is I won't give them a current logo to redesign. I'll make one up. So I'll flip a page to find like a town or a name or something. And then I'll flip another page to find an industry. And we just make stuff up and makes them really think. But those are two of my favorites. And I've got, I don't know, hundreds of, different tomes and different things like that. But those are some of my favorites. I have to make a list one of these days of some of that book. I had my buddy and I, Alan Peters, were talking books the other day for like 2 hours, But yeah, it's a huge part of what I do. I learned more from these books than I ever learned from anything you could find online. And it's not even close.
Now we know all his secrets. Everybody get those books.
Here's the thing. Y'all can look at the same stuff I do. That doesn't mean you know everything. No, I'm just kidding. No, Armin, I was on Brand New on Friday Likes a couple years ago, actually for the Bankhead project. And Armin told everybody where they could get the typefaces that I used for that project. And he's like, typesetting bravado not included. And I was like, whoa, I like that, But, all these things definitely help. They'll open up a whole new world to you.
Excellent. Thank you for the resources. If you send me a list, I can put it in the YouTube description for this video.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions?
Shin has one.
All right.
Okay. So because we're talking about book, this is actually related to my question. You mentioned about Michael Buru and Paul Rand and other famous designers as your influence, and it's very obvious for the influence. So do you have any opinion on designers who skips the fundamentals and not who don't look back on their design roots? Like they just want to do stuff like skip all the hard work.
I think we call them influencers, don't we? I don't know. I think that if you're jumping on trends and doing all this type of stuff, trends don't last. They're not meant to. They're flashes in the pan, and that's what it'll end up being. I think the issue, and I was talking with a few friends about this, the other day. People look at some of the more social media folks and just want to jump in, and some of them just want to jump into that and be known for all these different things, or they'll say, oh, if you do this you can you can bill $100,000 every month. And it's like, okay, show your work. You know, that's one of my favorite things on Twitter. You know, you see that and it's like, oh, you could do all this stuff. And it's like, okay, show your work, you know, and they never do. I think you can't skip, you know, you really can't. Just like everything else, it's like you want to be an electrical engineer, you know, but you don't study, you know, currents and voltage. You just want to go and start making, you know, cool looking, you know, fuse boxes. Okay. If you don't understand the currents and voltage, then you're going to have an incredibly short career. You know, there's no shortcuts to this thing. And I think people sometimes look at what you see online and whatnot as the end goal. And it's not. I'm going to try to say this in a nice way. I am doing this to get better and better and better and better at what I do. I am about as competitive a person as you will ever find. My goal, and I've told other designers, I've told a room full of designers about this. It's like my goal is to go back, keep working, keep getting better, keep doing that. And my goal in this is to kick all y'all's butts. I want to be very good at what I do. I treat this like an athlete. There's time in the gym. There's time spent not around people, developing my craft, getting better at what I do. It is just part of the game. And if you're not willing to put in that work, then you're going to have a plateau. I don't know what it is. It's different for every person. But if you're not willing to put in the work, then there's a plateau. If you don't want to go back and look at all the, you know, designers of the past, it's different for everybody. I'm not saying it's a prerequisite for doing what I do. I think there's definitely some things could help you develop in doing so. But once again, what's great for me may not be good for everybody else. But there's still a level of work that you want to put in. Can I introduce y'all to somebody really quick?
Yeah, sure.
And do you mind? I want to introduce y'all to somebody. This is my lovely wife, Julie. We recently celebrated 17 years being married. Yeah, she is beautiful, isn't she? She has come on in the last month as, oh, shoot, don't let her out. She has come on in the last month as my director of hospitality. She is helping me through a lot of things that really I just need a lot of help with. She's helping me with outreach. She's helping me with a lot of different things. But she's also one of my biggest supporters, and I wouldn't be here without her. So I had to make sure that she had some FaceTime for that. So.
Very nice. Let's jump in, Isaiah.
Well, the first thing I wanted to follow up on what Scott said. Those people that you see on Twitter and social media trying to advertise graphic design is an easy way to make money. Most of the times, you won't see them doing the braille design work. You will just mostly see them doing banners for someone's YouTube or for someone's YouTube or their Twitter. And the thing is, they end up on the 10%. And the 10% is that if 45% of designers they end up working for agencies, another 45% works in-house, and the 10% you end up having to freelance. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, with freelancing, only 10 out of that 10%, only 10% of people can be successful in that field. And usually those people that try to promote that, try to tell you that, oh, I can just use graphic design as a passive career, they often end up on sites like Fiverr and Freelancer and Upwork and 99 Designs.
You know, there are some folks that should be freelancers. There are some that do better in an agency. There's some folks who do better in-house. Yeah. You know, I think it's to each his own. It's to each their own, you know. You know, I can tell you right now, you know, freelances and running an independent studio is not for the faint of heart. You know, there's a lot of things you have to consider. There's a lot of things you have to, you know, that are far beyond just sitting down and designing all day. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm fighting to get more time to design. And that takes time, that takes money, that takes, you know, the right people around you. I have a studio manager She was actually a former mentee of mine. I've known her for about 5 or 6 years. She's been working with me now for about 2 years. She's been great, helping me get everything kind of organized and whatnot together. And then having my wife to help me out with the outreach and, some of the business and different things like that. It's been great. My goal is to, set so much of that aside to where I can just do the design. But I need good people and I need a good strategy and to make that happen. But to each his own.
Nichelle, why don't you jump in and then we'll finish this off.
Hi. I wanted to find out what your opinion is on this. My professor, she taught us like Adobe Suite and everything, and she basically stressed checking in with the trends to make our work more marketable. So she literally had a class or two that involved having us go onto places like YouTube and, go out into the world and get inspiration from various places. And she said, this is how you remain marketable. You got to see what the trend is and what those clients are looking for. And that's how you, keep the cash flowing. So do you agree with that? Or do you think we should kind of keep a firewall between us and the trends?
There's nothing wrong with understanding what's out there, and there's nothing wrong with being aware. Like, I'm aware of what the trends are right now. I see it every day on Brand New. I see it on, when Bill Gardner puts out his logo lounge trends and everything like that. I've been in every logo lounge. I've been in the last 6 logo lounge books, and I've never once shown up in his trends report. And I'm fine with that. Now, I still want to be aware of what's going on around me. I think that is still very key, but I am not, the biggest thing is I still want to know what's going on, but I'm not designing for the here and now. I'm designing for something that's going to last. Now, are there things that still work, and that people are still looking for? Yeah, absolutely. But as you get in there and you realize, hey, just because something's really cool right now. Okay, you remember from 2012 to like 2014, everything was like crossed arrows and crossed oars and, like fisherman's knots and anchors and everything like that.
Yeah.
If it's all out there and everyone's doing it, you're going to kind of get lost in all of that. I like to know what's going on so that I don't get lost in what everyone else is doing. Now, there are some things to be learned from. There are reasons some things become popular, and I always take that into consideration. But in the end, having that personal approach, I am designing this based on the person that I am designing for, the brand that I'm designing for, and the people that they are, that they're trying to relate to. I'm designing it for them, not for whatever is currently happening in the world. So there's a nice balance between the two. And I think, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's worthwhile. Awesome.
Thank you, Nichelle. Thank you so much, Scott. You've been so generous with your time. Really impressed with your work. And we will all check out what you have to offer on your website and on the Iconic brand site.
2 things. Head to @Studio Temporary on Instagram. Give me a follow. If you have another question over the next couple days or whatnot, shoot me a message and I will answer it on there. Because I know we get down to the end or it's like, oh, shoot, I forgot to ask this. I've been to places like that and it's the same thing. So if you have any questions moving forward, shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to respond. But I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with y'all today. I appreciate y'all. I'm honored to be a part of it. And I wish y'all the absolute best. And man, stay iconic.